and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to what is essentially the most hated game of 2020. Of course, I am talking about Project Cars 3, and unless you've been hiding under a rock, you will be very aware of just how much stick this game is receiving online at the moment, and particularly here on YouTube. I've been questioning whether to make this video at all. It is a difficult one when you do have a YouTube channel and you've got people watching your content. You need to be a little bit careful that you are giving out the correct information, and I certainly don't want to be one of those people that isn't. However, I do have some views on this game that may differ quite a lot from what you've heard from other YouTubers and from other people just generally online as well. But the important thing to remember is that these are my opinions. They're not necessarily going to be the same as yours, and I'm certainly not here trying to start any fights with anyone. That's definitely not what this channel's about. But I've put quite a number of hours into this game now, and genuinely I've had a really good experience. I've actually enjoyed it a lot. Now obviously I understand where everyone's arguments are coming from. This is not Project Cars 3, and I think that was where Slightly Mad Studios really got this entire game wrong, and that was calling it Project Cars at all. They should have called it something completely different, get away from that previous game, and actually what you've got here is a fairly decent arcade racer, and I'm going to go over the details of exactly what I like about it, and equally all the bits that I'm not such a big fan of as well. Just before I do though, let's just take a second to look at the lead up to this game's release, and a lot of people are saying this was the biggest downfall, and I have to completely agree. I feel like Slightly Mad Studios could have saved themselves a lot of this grief, a lot of this hatred that's being thrown at them, if they'd just been honest from the start. The word sim got thrown around way too much, and they must have known whilst making this game that's not really what they were aiming for. Admittedly, there is some clever handling and mechanics going on underneath the cars, but they're definitely masked by a much more arcadey feel, a much more accessible feel, which isn't a bad thing. But if your game is going to feel like that, stop telling everyone that it's going to be a sim, because all it does is get people in that sim racing community excited about what product they're going to receive, and then they're really disappointed when it all comes out and they get to actually feel the real thing. Now, if there's one thing I've learned whilst doing YouTube, it's that the sim racing community is incredibly vocal. Everyone has their own opinions, and unfortunately that is now why Slightly Mad Studios is getting this enormous backlash, and unfortunately it really has thrown a lot of negativity at this game to the point that it's definitely going to be damaging sales. What I would like to say on this subject though is that the clues were definitely there. It's not like Slightly Mad Studios were saying this is just going to be a sim. They were throwing in statements like this is going to be the spiritual successor to Need for Speed Shift. So if you genuinely believed that it wasn't going to be arcadey in any way, I feel like you've missed quite a lot of the clues that they gave you on the way. Admittedly, for the people that backed Project Cars in the first place, it's going to be disappointing that they've moved away from the whole sim racer experience that they've been sort of promising, or at least trying to achieve over the last, well, several years now. But honestly, I don't think you can really blame them for doing it. I mean, the reality is that Project Cars 1 and 2 were loved by some people. Myself, I enjoyed both games. I've got no issues with them, but then I'm not the kind of guy that has super strong opinions about things. If I like a game, I like a game. If I think a game's really, really bad, I just won't play it. But the reality is that Project Cars 1 and 2 got so much abuse, certainly from the, the hardcore sim racing community, because it was never ever good enough. If you're honest with yourselves, the sim racing community is a really hard thing to get into. The problem you've got is a bunch of people that play the same sim over and over again. They play the same one even though it's been out for years and years, and they do that because they like the way the cars feel in that particular game. When a new game comes out, inevitably they will try it, but they're never going to like it because they've spent so many hours playing with that previous game, and unless this new one feels identical to the one that they've been playing all those years, they don't feel like the cars feel like they're driving realistically. Now, for Slightly Mad Studios, Project Cars just always seemed to be that game that never felt quite right to anyone. Yes, admittedly, there was a small crowd of people, or not that small actually, quite a big crowd of people, like myself, that actually raced in it and just thought, you know what, this feels alright, and they were quite happy to get along with it. At the time, it was one of those things, it had great weather dynamics, something that was rarely seen, certainly from a console point of view. We'd never seen anything like that sort of level of detail before, and that's why Project Cars 2 was quite an important game. But just like anything in your own personal real life, if you were making something, you made it, You put it out there for people to judge it. You're showing people, what do you think of my thing that I've created? And everyone turned around to you and said, oh, it's absolute rubbish. Go back and have another go. So you went back, you had another go, you brought it back out again, and what did everyone say? Oh, it's absolute rubbish. Ultimately, eventually, you will just give up on it and you'll think, you know what, that's not working for me. Let's try something else. And that is exactly what we've witnessed here with this game. So take away all the pre-release hype and that whole fumble that Slightly Mad Studios brought upon themselves. And the important thing to think about here is, what are we actually left with? And the answer is definitely a 100% arcade experience. And if you go into this game expecting anything but that, you will definitely be disappointed. As I mentioned earlier, there was definitely a lot of talk about Need for Speed Shift before this game came out, and I went back and actually played the original Shift quite extensively before this came out, just so I had a fresh memory on exactly what it was like. And it's definitely fair to say that this shares most of its DNA, I would suggest, with Need for Speed Shift, and I'm surprised more people aren't actually drawing comparisons against the two games. If I had to compare it to anything that's sort of more recent, I would suggest the closest thing is the 2019 Grid that got released by Codemasters. They're quite similar games, but I have to say that I've enjoyed my time with Project Cars 3 a lot more than I did with Grid. Grid really felt like a grind to get through. To be fair, I certainly haven't got anywhere near completing Project Cars 3, but all I can say is the time that I've spent with it so far has been far more enjoyable. So let's talk about the things that I have been enjoying about this game. Now, previously Project Cars has been really inaccessible when it comes to using a controller. This time round, however, they have got this exactly right, which was a really important mechanic to get right, certainly if you're aiming yourself at an arcade market, at more of a casual player, because most people in that market wouldn't have a wheel set up in their living room. So, like I say, I'm pleased to say it works really well with a controller, to the point that I actually prefer playing this on a controller than I do on my G29. Now, wheels can be used, obviously, for this. In fact, there's a huge wealth of different wheels that are already pre-selected within the game. But personally, laying down on your sofa, whipping out a controller and just sticking it on the big TV is definitely the way to be playing this game. The reason the controller works so well is down to the handling within the game, and this is definitely what is splitting opinion more than anything else. It's definitely nothing like a previous Project Cars game. However, the handling has been simplified, but you can still feel some real world physics underneath each of these cars, and it's quite impressive. There's definitely tyre flex, chassis flex, you can feel all of that. You can tell when a car is understeering, but equally it's got some glorious oversteer, and they've simplified it to the point that you never feel out of control. Certainly with the oversteer, you can get pretty much sideways, which, if anybody knows me and watches this channel a lot, you know I love drifting. You could definitely very easily drift within this game, but never feel out of control. In terms of the content on offer here for your money, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. There's a great selection of real world tracks that most of you guys will already know and love, and on top of that, the car selection is fantastic. There's the usual selection of modes that you expect from most games these days, starting with the career mode, which is probably where you guys are going to spend most of your time if you are just starting out. It's a really nice system they've got in place. It's nothing that you haven't seen before, but what is quite nice with these career events is the fact that none of them are too long. It never feels like it's a huge struggle to get through each section of the game. They tend to last 2 to 3 laps, and they're constantly varied between different styles of events so that you don't get too bored doing the same thing over and over again. On top of this, you have got the online portion of the game. Now, let's start with Rivals mode. It is very similar to the style of events you get in Dirt Rally 2, if you've ever tried doing any of them. You get your daily, your weekly, and your monthly challenge. You are against other people, but not directly on the track. It's just about setting a time on that track, and then you go onto a leaderboard. The people at the top, it would appear, get the higher payout, so it really pays to get in there and try and give it your best. It's nothing new, I know, but it is a great addition to the game. It is definitely my preferred kind of online event. You can take away all of the lunatics that you seem to find in online lobbies that just want to smash you off the course and stuff. There is just you on that track. It just gives you the opportunity to do as well as you possibly can and see how you're doing against the rest of the community. Of course, there is a more traditional standard online racing component to the game as well, but this time it is handled more like GT Sport if you've played that. Effectively, each event has a specific time that it starts, so you just go into the lobby that you're about to race in, and then as soon as the time ticks down, you are ready to go. It works, again, really, really well, and so far I've had no issues finding anyone to race with, and on top of that, actually, some of the racing has been pretty decent. Not always, admittedly, there are still people out there that are just causing trouble, but I think you're going to struggle to get away with that in any type of game you play. With all that good, however, sadly, there are some negatives as well, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have already heard this. Like I say, most people have been focusing heavily on the negatives of this game, and there are a few of them that I have to agree with, and I've definitely noticed while playing through it. So first up, I'm actually playing this on a relatively high-end PC. I've got the game set to Ultra, and the visuals aren't actually as impressive as Project Cars 2 was all those years ago, which is a bit of a surprise, and I'm not sure why this has happened. I understand that Slightly Mad Studios have had to make this game obviously for the Xbox One and the PS4 as well, which is really old hardware now. It's been around 7 years, something like that. But it just shows that the game is poorly optimized for it to not even run as well on a high-end gaming PC. The visuals should really be moving forward, or at least be on par with Project Cars 2, but sadly this just isn't quite there. Which really surprised me, considering we are just a couple of months away from a new console generation, but I guess Slightly Mad Studios weren't too bothered about getting this game out on the PS5 or the Xbox Series X. The next issue that I really feel like could have been avoided if they'd spent a little bit more time on it is the vehicle customization. If you, like I, have come from playing a lot of GT Sport or even Forza, you'll be used to a whole wealth of options when it comes to customizing your vehicles. With this one, however, it's not quite like that. Think Need for Speed 10 years ago, that sort of style of customization here. You can slap a sticker on the bonnet, you can slap a few on the side of the car. Don't expect too much more than that, and to be honest, the cars end up just looking worse than they did in the first place. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that they did put some form of customization into the game, but at the same time, I just feel like it was a bit of an afterthought and they could have done so much more with it, and it really does frustrate me when games come out like that, certainly in this day and age when they must look at the competition around them and think to themselves, why are we even bothering unless we're going to make a real effort with it? And lastly, definitely the most irritating thing for this game for me is consistency. And unfortunately, this is the only one of my real problems with the game that does actually affect the gameplay, the important part of the game. Visuals you can take for what they are. Customization, you don't even have to get involved with it. But unfortunately, when you have a problem with a game that does impact the gameplay, it can be a little bit damaging. So when I say consistency, I'm talking about a couple of different things here. Now, there is inconsistent AI within the game, and it seems to be across all difficulties. So every now and again during a career event, you will come up against a car that seems to be impossibly difficult to beat. You will be miles ahead of the rest of the pack, but that one car seems to be able to shoot past you and just keep going faster and faster and faster. Now, there's no real reason for this. It doesn't seem to necessarily happen all the time, even on the same event. However, I did run into it a couple of times, and it can be really frustrating when you do come across it. Hopefully it's just a simple fix and something that they will patch in an upcoming update at some point, but we'll just have to wait and see if they actually follow through with that. And lastly, it's the difficulty. The game just doesn't feel that difficult, aside from when you have road cars coming past you at ridiculous speeds that you can't catch up to. But for the most part, you can have this game set to the most difficult setting with all the assists turned off, and you're still going to be breezing past most of the competition. Apart from on maybe something like Cadwell Park, where there's just no space to get past cars. You may struggle within a 2 to 3 lap race to actually get to the front. But for the most part, you will just be breezing past the rest of the competition and getting a first place victory all the time. Now, I know they wanted this game to appeal to casual gamers, but there's no reason to make the harder settings as easy as they actually are. You want to give people a challenge. If someone wants to set the game to the hardest possible setting, it's because they want that challenge. They want that fight. They want the idea that they might not necessarily even get a podium. But unfortunately at the moment there's no option to make the game that difficult. But again, this could be a nice simple patch. Fingers crossed it gets done quite soon. I don't know how many other people are having this problem, but I'm definitely not a particularly good racer, so I'm sure it must be affecting a few of you out there. But overall, for me, the positives far outweigh the negatives. Like I've said a couple of times now, I've had a lot of fun with this game, and I know a lot of you guys out there don't feel exactly the same way, but I do wonder how many people are being steered by the negative reviews that this game is getting. And yes, it's definitely not perfect, but take it for what it is. I know Slightly Mad Studios absolutely ruined this game for a lot of people just by their awful PR before the game was actually released. But I say it again, it is an arcade game. Expect nothing else from it. And actually, if you enjoyed things like Need for Speed Shift, there's no reason that you wouldn't enjoy this game. I don't want you to watch this video though and go and buy the game on what I'm saying, because ultimately your opinion might be completely different from mine. All I can do is tell you exactly how I feel, and I've had a load of fun with it. Will I be playing it in 2 months' time? I don't actually know. Probably not, but it's been a great distraction. I've enjoyed my time with it, and you know what? I just feel like it didn't deserve quite the hatred that it was getting from absolutely everybody. But what do you guys think? And I'm not sure I should be asking that. Please go easy with me down in the comment section, but it would be great to hear that someone else on this planet actually enjoys this game, and it's not just me. Everywhere I go is so negative, so any positivity is welcome. But equally, if you just want to let me know your thoughts down below, please do. I'm still struggling to get content out at the moment, which I'm sure a lot of you have noticed. I'm so busy. We're currently selling the house. We've got our offer in on the new house, packing, getting stuff sorted out on this place before we go. It's just a bit of a nightmare at the moment. So apologies, there are huge gaps between these videos. Hopefully this will all be sorted out, let's say in 4 weeks, but I don't want to promise anything. But hopefully I'll be in the new house by that point, and fingers crossed I can get back to my normal schedule. But as always, if you do fancy it and you want to take pity on me, please subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate every single one of you that does it. Also, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Thanks for coming by the channel today, and I'll see you on the next one.